Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping right into something absolutely critical for, well, pretty much any organization trying to navigate today's world, business continuity management.
Definitely critical.
And we're using a fantastic resource as our guide, the Professional Practices for Business Continuity Management from DRI International. The latest version is May 2023, right?
That's the one, and it really is the gold standard, you could say. It's the body of knowledge for how you build, implement, and crucially maintain these programs.
And not just build them, but check how good your existing ones are too.
Exactly. It helps find those gaps, make everything more cohesive.
Yeah.
And the new version, it puts more focus on things like cybersecurity, using insurance smartly, data backup.
Oh, interesting. So more modern threats are baked in now.
For sure. Technology-specific stuff, even manufacturing strategies. It was a pretty big overhaul between late 2021 and mid-2022.
Okay, so our mission then for this deep dive is to really pull out the core ideas, the processes, the essentials for building that organizational resilience, all based on these professional practices.
Sounds like a plan.
And there are 10 of these practices forming a kind of framework. We'll walk through them. Program management, risk assessment, business impact analysis, strategies, incident response.
Plan development, awareness and training, exercising and maintenance, crisis comms.
And finally, coordinating with external agencies. Phew, quite a list.
It's comprehensive for a reason.
Right. Let's kick off with number 1, program management. What's the main goal here? Laying the groundwork.
Pretty much two main things. First, you have to establish why the organization actually needs a business continuity program. Make the case.
Okay.
And second, it's about introducing the key concepts, setting the stage, defining the terms, that sort of thing.
Okay, so the BC professional. What's their job in this initial phase? Getting it started.
They're really the engine at this stage. They need to build that compelling case, like I said, explain the value, and then, importantly, get the support.
Support meaning?
Meaning buy-in from leadership, and crucially, funding. So that involves practical things like creating a program charter, sort of its constitution,
Right.
defining the budget, figuring out the structure, who's in charge, maybe setting up a steering committee for oversight. Then they coordinate and lead the actual rollout.
So what does that look like day to day? What are they actually doing?
It's quite varied. Starts with research, digging into requirements, business needs, legal stuff, regulations, contracts, both inside and outside the company.
Making sure it fits with everything else?
Exactly, and resolving any conflicts with how things are already run. They need to be really clear about the benefits, how it helps the organization achieve its mission.
And explaining leadership's role.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Emphasizing their accountability, even liability. Then it's about communication, creating awareness reports, presentations to get that buy-in across the board.
Okay.
And then the planning part, developing detailed project plans for the key pieces like the risk assessment and the BIA we'll talk about, setting schedules, timelines, milestones, figuring out who needs to be involved.
And it doesn't stop once it's set up, right?
Not at all. It's ongoing. Monitoring effectiveness, benchmarking against how others do it, and reporting back to leadership regularly, keeping the program alive and effective.
That makes sense. A strong start is crucial. Okay, moving on to professional practice 2. Risk assessment. What's the focus here? Finding the problems.
Essentially, yes. It's about identifying potential risks, anything that could negatively impact the organization. Assets, operations, reputation, you name it.
And then just listing them isn't enough, I guess.
Right. The second part is assessing those risks, understanding the potential damage, the negative consequences. This is what lets you figure out the best ways to reduce or mitigate them.
So how does the professional guide this? It sounds like it could get complicated.
It can be. Their role is key. First, getting agreement on how you're going to assess risk, the methodology. Then, leading the charge to gather information from everywhere to actually pinpoint the risks. That means figuring out the probability, how likely is it? And the impact, how bad would it be? Evaluating how it affects operations, and importantly, how good are the controls you already have in place?
Like firewalls or backup generators.
Exactly. Are they effective? Then documenting everything, presenting the findings, and making clear recommendations. Often, they'll also need leadership to sign off on the organization's overall risk appetite. How much risk are we willing to accept?
Okay, so that's the role. What are the key activities? What does doing a risk assessment actually entail?
Lots of collaboration, for starters. Talking to risk management, insurance folks, legal, security, supply chain, IT, making sure all angles are covered, internal and external requirements.
Getting everyone in the room, basically.
Metaphorically, yes.
Yeah.
Agreeing on that standardized methodology is vital, maybe using quantitative data qualitative analysis, or both. Understanding that risk appetite we mentioned is key context.
And then finding the risks themselves.
Yeah, identifying those exposures could be natural disasters, floods, earthquakes,
Okay.
could be tech failures, could be human stuff accidents or, deliberate acts. Industry-specific risks, too.
Wow, it's a wide net.
It has to be. And you look at things like, could it happen without warning? Is it controllable? Then you evaluate each one based on frequency, probability, severity, how fast it could happen.
And the impact on different areas.
Right. Workforce impact, supply chain, cyber, IT, delivering services, facilities, reputation, legal, regulatory, all of it. And assessing those existing controls, preventative ones and mitigating ones.
And this leads to recommendations.
Definitely. Things like improving physical security, access control, barriers, beefing up cybersecurity data protection, monitoring, changes to policies, procedures, training, maybe adding redundancy for utilities. You also need to talk to external partners like key suppliers. What are their risks? Finally, documenting everything. The risks, controls, recommendations for new controls with cost-benefit, priorities, maybe options for risk transfer like insurance.
And documenting if leadership decides not to act on a risk.
Crucial. You need a record of that decision and why. And one thing people often miss, those cascading effects. What happens if a key supplier suddenly disappears? That's a big one.
Yeah, recent years have certainly taught us that lesson. Okay, so we know the risks. Next is professional practice 3. Business impact analysis, the BIA. What's the goal here?
The BIA is all about identifying and critically prioritizing the organization's functions and processes. What's absolutely essential, what relies on what else.
Understanding the domino effect if something goes down.
Exactly. Understanding the impact of unavailability and trying to quantify that impact on the business, on customer stakeholders. And ultimately, it highlights the gaps between what you need to recover quickly and what you can actually do right now.
You mentioned trying to figure out what's most critical. What's a common blind spot there?
Often, it's those hidden interdependencies. You think a process is minor, but it turns out it relies heavily on a specific IT system or a single supplier or another department's output. Those hidden links can be the real Achilles heel.
That's a great point. So the professional's role in the BIA, how do they uncover these things?
They lead the definition of the impact criteria. How are we measuring bad? Both qualitative stuff like reputation and quantitative, like financial loss. They recommend the scope, the methodology. And they analyze the data collected to figure out the recovery time objective, the RTO.
How fast you need it back.
Precisely. And the recovery point objective, the RPO.
Which is about data loss, how much you can afford to lose.
You got it. And based on those, identifying the resources needed, people, tech, facilities to get things back up and running. Finally, presenting all this to leadership for approval, getting them to agree on the RTOs, RPOs, and resource needs is vital.
Okay, so how does this BIA actually get done? What are the practical steps?
Well, you start by identifying anything super time-sensitive payroll, regulatory filings, things with hard deadlines. Missing those often has immediate severe consequences.
Makes sense.
Then, defining and getting agreement on those impact criteria is absolutely key. Customer impact, how quickly do they notice? Financial impact, lost revenue, profit, stock price hits, fines. Regulatory impact, fines again, maybe losing a license. Operational impact, service levels dropping. Supply chain grinding to a halt. Reputational damage. Workforce impact.
It's a long list.
It covers a lot of ground. You also consider insurance here, business interruption, cyber, etc. Can some of this financial risk be transferred?
Right.
Once the methodology and criteria are set with leadership, you identify who has the knowledge you need. Then choose your tools. Questionnaires are common for initial info. Then maybe workshops or interviews to dig deeper.
Talking to the people who actually do the work.
It's essential. You identify all major functions, including those critical third parties. Then collect data on processes, resource needs for different outage durations, impact of losing specific resources, and all those internal and external dependencies, data systems, tech, suppliers. Analyzing that data lets you prioritize the processes and map out dependencies. This directly tells you the recovery order. Then you write it all up in a report.
The BIA report.
Yep. Summarizes potential impacts, lists prioritized processes with their RTOs and RPOs, details resource needs, and crucially, highlights any gaps between requirements and current capabilities. Usually goes through drafts, feedback, then final approval from the top.
Okay, risks identified, impact understood. Now we need a plan, a strategy. Professional practice 4, business continuity strategies. Objective.
Simple, really.
Hmm.
Use the findings from the risk assessment and the BIA to pick strategies that actually fix the gaps you found, reduce the risks, meet the recovery objectives. And again, identifying those major functions and third parties is part of this.
So the professional's role here is translating analysis into action.
Exactly. Analyzing that RA and BIA data to pinpoint practical continuity and recovery strategies that can demonstrably meet those RTOs and RPOs.
Uh-huh.
This also includes protecting vital records, physical ones especially, identifying technology recovery options, tackling supply chain vulnerabilities found in the BIA, and importantly, doing a cost-benefit analysis for potential strategies before recommending them to leadership for the final decision.
Okay, let's talk concrete strategies. What kind of options are actually on the table? What activities are involved in picking the right ones?
There's a whole menu, really, and the best fit depends on the organization and the risks. For operational stuff, you might develop manual workarounds.
Like doing things on paper if the system's down.
Exactly. Or maybe reciprocal agreements with another company, finding internal space you could use in an emergency, or contracting with an external alternate site provider.
Okay.
Could be transferring work or staff to another location, suspending non-essential work, building a dedicated recovery site, or enabling large-scale work from home.
And for manufacturing or distribution.
Specific options there too. Repairing equipment, shifting production, retooling lines, using inventory, reducing production, buying back product, outsourcing. Lots of levers to pull.
Protecting vital records, you mentioned that.
Yeah, often involves scanning and off-site or cloud storage. But you have to consider the legal side. Can you rely on copies?
Good point. And evaluating alternate sites.
Lots to consider. Location, accessibility, suitability, communications, equipment, security, power, water. Sustainability is key.
And you judge these strategies against
the RTOs and RPOs from the BIA. Compare options, do that cost-benefit analysis. You also need to review your insurance, cyber, extra expense, business interruption, and see how it fits into the recovery picture.
how it might reduce the financial hit.
Precisely. For technology recovery, again, various options. Manual workarounds, specific tech solutions, multiple data centers, high availability systems, third-party services, cloud.
Making sure the recovery site has the right environment for tech gear, supporting remote workers.
All part of it. Doing a preliminary cost benefit for tech options, too. And thinking about logistics, regulations, financial hurdles, supply chain issues for the recovery itself.
Right. Getting resources to the recovery site, for instance.
Exactly. Collaborating with external contacts can help here, too. Ultimately, you validate that the chosen strategy aligns with the impacts, objectives, and value of what you're protecting. Then you document it all and present recommendations for leadership approval.
Got the strategies. Now, the actual incident happens. How do we respond effectively? Professional Practice 5, Incident Preparedness and Response. Objectives.
Two key things here. First, really understanding the types of incidents that could threaten life safety, damage property, disrupt operations, or harm the environment, and knowing their potential impacts.
Okay.
Second, establishing and maintaining the capability to actually protect against these things. That means having a solid incident management system for command, control, and coordination, using both internal folks and external help when needed.
And the professional's role in getting this readiness in place.
It's pretty broad. Identifying the specific hazards the organization faces. Understanding all the relevant regulations, health and safety, fire codes, environmental, cybersecurity.
Knowing the rules.
Absolutely. And knowing what resources you have to be able to enter. Internal people, equipment, systems, and what external resources might be needed for different types of incidents. They evaluate existing plans based on the risk assessment, conduct a resource needs assessment to find gaps.
So figuring out if you have enough fire extinguishers or people trained in first aid.
That kind of thing, yes. They review plans, recommend, and help implement that incident management system, make sure people understand the plans, coordinate with internal departments and external agencies like fire and police, and get leadership approval for everything.
So what are the practical steps here, the key activities for preparedness and response?
It starts with detailed hazard identification. Natural stuff, storms, quakes, outbreaks. Human-caused accidents like spills or intentional acts like sabotage. Tech failures. For each hazard, you develop plausible scenarios, how likely, how big, where, what's vulnerable, what prevention is already in place. Then assess the potential impacts for each scenario. Casualties, property damage, environmental harm, reputation, financial, regulatory, operational disruption.
Compliance is big here too, right?
Huge. And building relationships internally with EHS, security, facilities, HR, externally with emergency management, EMS, fire, law enforcement, hazmat, cyber teams,
Knowing who to call.
and having them know you. Gathering existing plans, reviewing them, contacting public agencies to understand their procedures, resources, communication lines, assessing your life safety measures, evacuation, shelter-in-place, lockdown, accountability, health and hygiene protocols too.
And protecting property.
Yeah, building systems, HVAC, fire suppression communications, property conservation for severe weather, hazmat containment, including notification rules. Understanding public service response times is important too.
Knowing how long it takes for the fire department to arrive.
Exactly. Doing that resource needs assessment personnel, systems, equipment, detection alarms, communication, mutual aid agreements, identifying gaps, reviewing plans for threat monitoring, detection, warning responders, reporting, escalation,
Setting up the command structure.
recommending and implementing an incident management organization, roles, responsibilities, authority, succession plans, understanding incident command systems, ICS, developing procedures for situation analysis, action planning, resource management, briefings, communication logging,
And the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center.
establishing a physical or virtual EOC equipment, communications, procedures, access to plans, then reviewing all these plans and procedures with the people involved, assisting with coordination between internal and external groups, identifying documents needed for public agencies, and finally, getting leadership sign-off.
Okay, we know what to do. Now documenting it so everyone's on the same page. Professional practice 6, plan development and implementation. Objectives.
Two main goals. First, formally document those approved strategies and procedures into clear, usable plans that guide the response and keep essential functions going.
Got it. The actual plan documents.
Right. Second, define specific, measurable criteria for exercising and testing these plans to make sure they actually work and achieve their goals.
Yeah.
Proving readiness.
And the professional's role in creating these plans.
They take those approved strategies from Practice 4 and translate them into the detailed plan documents. They define the structure, coordinate the documentation effort for operational and infrastructure recovery plans, and make sure the final documents are published and accessible.
So what kinds of plans are we talking about, and what are the key steps to get them documented and usable?
It's really a suite of plans. Incident management plans, life safety, command structure, roles, damage assessment, crisis management plans the team, procedures for response and communication, stakeholder notifications, recovery site activation plans, how to declare, set up the alternate site infrastructure, admin, tech, operations, logistics, travel, housing, operational recovery plans, recovery teams, resources needed, tech, records, contacts.
And the business continuity plan itself.
That details how essential functions continue using alternative methods. Then technology recovery plans, very detailed step-by-step IT restoration, dependencies, change management during recovery, testing.
And plans to get back to normal.
Exactly. Plans to stand down the recovery site and emergency actions. The process involves implementing the strategies, first acquiring resources, establishing processes, defining the plan organization and teams needed, aligned with scope people, facilities, tech.
Defining roles for plan development.
Yes, tasks, timelines, tools needed, like planning software, supporting documents, built-in maintenance like version control, defining content requirements for each plan, governance, scope, objectives, assumptions, time-sensitive operations, resource needs, org structures, activation procedures.
Then getting feedback.
Providing a draft plan with testing recommendations to process owners. Getting leadership approval. Establishing secure distribution and control, making sure people can access them even if IT is down. Then publishing and distributing to authorized folks.
Plans are documented. Now making sure people actually know what's in them and what to do. Professional practice 7. Awareness and training programs. Goal.
Simple but vital. Make sure everyone in the organization has the knowledge and skills to respond calmly and effectively during an incident. Minimize panic. Maximize effectiveness.
And the professional's role in setting this up.
They lead the charge. Establish the program's objectives and components. Assess awareness and training needs across all functions. Prioritize those needs. Develop the methodology. Identify, develop, or acquire the tools and resources needed, and oversee the delivery.
So how do you build an effective program that actually makes a difference? What are the key activities?
Starts with defining the program scope and objectives, recommending a schedule. Getting strong leadership support and personnel commitment is non-negotiable. Defining the desired level of awareness and training needed across the org, and figuring out the resources and budget. Then you identify who needs to know what.
Different levels for different people.
Exactly. Some just need awareness program objectives, scope, their role in notification and initial response. Others need specific training, incident reporting, alerts, evacuation, shelter in place, scenario walkthroughs, operational, and tech.
Management training. Team training.
Yep. Management might need incident identification exercises. BCT members might need hands-on drills, complex scenario walkthroughs. You need an ongoing needs assessment surveys, gap analysis, reviewing exercise results.
Checking if the training is actually working.
Right. Benchmarking current levels against desired levels.
Yeah.
Designing the training process, clear objectives, right delivery methods, like scenario exercises, simulations, defined roles, written plan, leadership approval.
Using different resources.
Leveraging everything internal experts, external resources like courseware, websites, social media for awareness, apps, conferences, webinars, user groups, white papers, certifications, academic programs.
And then actually doing it.
Scheduling and conducting the activities. Monitoring effectiveness through surveys, self-evaluations. Periodically reviewing results and reporting to leadership. Continuously evaluating and updating the program. And importantly, making sure BC awareness is part of new hire onboarding.
Makes sense to catch people right at the start. Okay, plans documented, people trained. How do we know it works? Professional practice 8, exercise test, assessment, and maintenance. Objective.
It's all about continuous improvement. Establishing a program to constantly improve the organization's readiness to respond and recover. It's never done.
And the professional's role in keeping things sharp.
They're responsible for setting up the exercise and testing program and the plan maintenance program. They define the governance, establish an audit process, and based on exercise results, they provide written recommendations for improvements, maybe even changing strategies or plans if objectives aren't being met.
Okay, the practicalities. What's involved in testing and maintaining these plans?
Developing a structured exercise program is key. It has to align with the overall BC program scope and objectives, aimed at finding gaps and fixing them. Get leadership support and approval, document criteria and assumptions.
Different kinds of tests.
A whole range, like safety drills, walkthroughs, tabletop exercises, notification tests, alternate site tests, infrastructure application tests, functional process tests, full end-to-end tests, internal reviews, even fully integrated tests with external partners like suppliers.
Who participates?
Depends on the test. Recovery teams, observers, monitors, auditors, facilitators, maybe suppliers or outsourcers. You need realistic scenarios based on your risk assessment priorities, testing those strategies and ability to meet RTOS RPOs. Define objectives, scope, notification process, announced or unannounced for each test. Set a schedule at least annually, maybe more often based on regulations or changes. Define evaluation criteria, quantitative and qualitative, linked to objectives and measuring against BIA metrics.
What happens before test?
Prep work. Identify resources, participants. Communicate objectives, roles, resources needed. Specify if it's production or non-production environment. Set time, date, location, timetable. Have a cancellation plan just in case.
And during and after.
During, record events, document results, declare the end, do cleanup. Afterward is critical. Debriefing sessions, identifying lessons learned and improvements needed, reporting results with recommendations, creating an action plan with responsibilities and timelines, tracking outstanding issues, monitoring progress, documenting lessons learned, communicating results.
And maintenance, keeping plans up to date.
Equally important, define ownership for plan elements. Set maintenance schedules and procedures. Select tools. Monitor activities. Establish change control. Maintenance should address exercise recommendations and organizational changes. Report on activities.
Change management is key here.
Absolutely. Analyzing entity changes, version control, reissue procedures, distribution lists, updating based on audit findings, reviewing stakeholder expectations regularly, identifying governance models, defining exercise frequency and scope based on needs with leadership approval.
Audits, too.
Yep. Establishing an audit process, self-assessments, preparing for internal or external audits, selecting audit tools, conducting audits covering everything, requirements, documents, templates, plans, exercise results, maintenance, repository, version control, distribution, change control.
Responding to findings.
Reviewing responses, confirming action plans are submitted and documented, capturing completed actions in the plan. Getting leadership approval for revisions. Choosing how to communicate findings. Establishing monitoring for audit actions, tracking issues, responsibility, target dates. It's a cycle.
A very thorough cycle. Okay, communication during a crisis is paramount. Professional practice 9, crisis communications, objectives.
Two main things. Create and maintain a comprehensive crisis communications plan, and ensure that plan provides for timely, accurate, effective communication with all relevant internal and external parties during and after a crisis.
And the professional's role in making sure that communication flows smoothly?
They design, develop, and implement the plan. They communicate it to the team members, train them on their roles, they exercise and test the plan regularly, and they review and update it at least annually, or more often if needed, due to exercise results, regulatory changes, or organizational shifts.
So setting up and maintaining that plan, what are the essential steps?
Start by reviewing any existing plan for gaps. Use the risk assessment results to identify potential incidents needing specific communication strategies. Define the plan's objectives, scope, structure.
Where does the team operate from? Who does what?
Establish primary and secondary locations, physical or virtual. Define roles and responsibilities, who handles internal messaging, who talks to the media. Identify all stakeholders needing info: employees, families, investors, customers, vendors, outsourcers, cyber info groups, insurers, community leaders, authorities, regulators, unions, competitors, media, bloggers.
That big list again.
It has to be comprehensive. Develop the notification process, tone, content, frequency before, during, after. Identify communication channels, meetings, calls, notification systems, email, conference calls, internet, press conferences, info lines, media, websites, social media, blogs. Establish guidelines for identifying incident impacts and initial communication. Assign team members. Get leadership approval for the plan. Develop guidelines for interaction between crisis comms and incident response teams.
Pre-approved messages.
Create sample communications and templates. Saves time under pressure. Ensure a clear approval process for all outgoing communications. Accuracy is key. Distribute the plan, provide training on roles, triggers, notification, approvals, tools.
Testing is important here too.
Definitely. Exercise the crisis comms plan regularly, ideally integrated into broader BC exercises. Use appropriate testing methods, develop scenarios, scope, objectives, conduct debriefs, identify lessons learned, corrective actions, and review and update the plan based on exercises, regulations, or organizational changes, annually at minimum.
Okay, last one. Thinking beyond our own walls. Professional practice 10, coordinating with external agencies and resources. Main objective.
To set up clear policies and procedures for coordinating response efforts with public entities, police, fire, health departments, and relevant private resources. It builds directly on the incident response framework from Practice 5.
And the professional's role in building these external links.
They establish the organization's incident response procedures, making sure they align with Practice 5. They need to know the relevant guidelines from authorities and identify which external agencies have jurisdiction or could provide support. Their job is to ensure smooth coordination between internal procedures and external protocols and capabilities.
So the practical steps for coordinating with the outside world during an incident.
Starts with identifying all regulatory agencies with jurisdiction, public health, facility officials, fire marshals, law enforcement, regulators, OSHA, etc. Understanding requirements for submitting facility info, occupancy, hazards, protection systems, response procedures to these agencies. Knowing requirements for periodic facility inspections, including expectations for exercises and training frequency. Identifying mandatory incident reporting requirements and timeframes. Developing or updating internal procedures to comply with laws and directives, working with legal and compliance.
Keeping external agencies informed.
Reporting prescribed info to them. Monitoring changes in laws and regulations and updating procedures accordingly. Getting leadership approval for these externally focused procedures.
And coordinating with first responders.
Identifying the agencies likely to respond first. Developing emergency alerting procedures, like for hazmat or injury reporting. Establishing liaison relationships with representatives from these agencies.
Building those connections before you need them.
Crucial. Inviting them to tour facilities, get their recommendations. Clearly defining internal roles and responsibilities for coordinating with them during different scenarios. Coordinating and participating in joint exercises and tests with these agencies.
Learning how to work together.
Exactly. Conducting debriefs after joint exercises, documenting results, lessons learned, improvement actions, sharing results internally with leadership, and updating internal plans based on feedback and lessons learned from these interactions, following the regular exercise program schedule.
Wow. Okay, so pulling this all together, it's incredibly clear that business continuity management following these DRI practices isn't just one thing. It's a really comprehensive, systematic process, 10 interconnected parts.
Absolutely. It's not just about reacting when things go wrong. It's fundamentally about proactively building resilience. through that planning, assessment, training, and constant improvement we've been talking about.
Right. And understanding these practices gives anyone interested in organizational stability a really powerful framework, doesn't it?
Definitely. Whether you're a professional looking to up your game, trying to understand your own company's approach better, or even just curious about how organizations handle disruptions, these principles provide a really solid, practical foundation.
It really makes you think, though, with businesses being so complex and interconnected now, especially globally,
Hmm.
how might these BCM principles apply beyond, the traditional floods and fires?
That's a great question.
Could we use these same ideas, this proactive approach, for things like massive supply chain vulnerabilities or widespread cyber attacks? It feels like the landscape of risk is constantly shifting.
It absolutely is. And the importance of being proactive, strategic about building that resilience, it just seems to grow, doesn't it? It's definitely something worth pondering.
Indeed. Well, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. Thanks so much for walking us through it.